Hi, everybody. Sorry for the 3-4 minute delay in our broadcast. Welcome to Lunch and Learn with Daniel Toe for the Stigma-Free Society and the Surrey School District. I want to welcome you all to this broadcast, whether you're watching live now or you're watching later on a pre-recorded. I'm hoping that you're going to be able to watch this later. Today we are talking about depression. I do have a few guests on, but a couple of them are having technical difficulties, so I need to make sure I send them the link again. But first, we do have on here TJ Rai or Tajinder Rai, who works for the Surrey School District as a registered clinical counselor, as well as he doubles up as a secondary counselor for some of our at-risk youth programs. And of course, we're all on here on the shared traditional territories of the Kwalin, Samiamu, Coast Salish, and Katzie First Nations in the Surrey School District. And we are representing the Surrey School District, even though we are broadcasting for the Stigma-Free Society. As we continue on today, our topic today is about depression. Now, I do have two other guests to come on. I do have to send them a link. But TJ, why don't you, as I send these other two gentlemen a link, because it didn't work the first link I sent them, can you maybe just introduce yourself, tell them a little bit about what you do, both for the school district and the community, while I send these two gentlemen a link, and hopefully they can get on to the feed with us.
Perfect. So I'm Tajinder Singh Rai, one of the district resource counselors that helps support the interagency program. So all of the programs that Daniel Toe oversees. And it's our specialized program within the Surrey School District, supporting any type of mental health, behavioral, or other needs. Students for students who don't fit into the regular high school system or one of our learning centers and need additional supports to be successful at school. I myself mainly support the high school students in our programs, and Ian Rieveley, our DRC, mainly supports our elementary school programs. I know Ian's coming on shortly, and he can talk a little bit more about his program. So any of our kids can have anywhere from significant mental health, including anxiety or depression, or may need some support with their behavioral challenges that can't be supported within a regular high school setting, but still are able to be successful in a school setting. So there could be behavioral challenges that we need to support as well.
Okay, awesome. And, we do have Michael Jacob that's trying to link on, and Ian Rieveley. Ian is also a counselor, and Michael Jacob is a district behavioral specialist. And I thought it'd be super appropriate to talk to these three gentlemen today, and for now, TJ, about the topic of depression. As we go through yet another year of the global pandemic, and we are seeing this in our schools, right, TJ? That we're seeing that the mental health and illnesses such as depression are starting to come more to the forefront. Families are more openly talking about it, and I do want to talk about how that affects our students, both in our alternate programs, but also in the mainstream. As I understand it, you also have private practice as well as a counselor. And as you visit schools and as you work with students, you most definitely run into kids experiencing depression. From your perspective, how do kids with depression interact in the classroom? What are some telltale signs teachers can look for when they're interacting with a student with depression, and just sort of give your perspective of that, especially even as you see kids in private practice or in the schools. You visit all of our different high schools as well as some elementary. You've done some work in those as well. Like, what are some signs that you see, and how can teachers tell if a kid is depressed?
So oftentimes I like to talk about the baseline. It sounds like I always like to check in, has this kid or this student been off a baseline in the last several weeks or even months? Have you noticed huge changes in the way they present in the classroom? Are they coming tired in the mornings? Are they isolating more? Are they cranky or more angry? Like, is there changes that you're noticing within the classroom? Why is that student sticking out for you all of a sudden? Mm-hmm. So you always want to look at changes in baseline at first. And so what's been happening for them in terms of what they used to see and what they see now? Are they more sensitive to rejection all of a sudden? Something that there wasn't before? Are there changes in appetite? Are you noticing that they're missing school more? Is there something, are there changes that are happening? They could be more externalizing all of a sudden. So what are the changes you're noticing? It could be even fatigue or low energy, right? And so really checking and understanding what changes did you notice over the last several weeks or months, right?
Yeah. Now, does this sometimes come off as even physical ailments? Like, we've often talked about mental health and wellness being really connected, like physical illness connected to mental health. What are some changes that teachers can tell in the classroom, right? Where a student, you mentioned appetite, are some of those things like how do teachers even check in with students when they're seeing that? Like maybe it might not be mental illness. You don't want to assume everything is depression, but also you want to be aware, right? You want to have awareness.
And so, yeah, there might be some physical complaints such as stomach aches or headaches that you've never noticed before. And definitely some of the things I just talked about are not causation. There could be correlations between depression and what's happening for the student. We always want to check in with the family doctor or a doctor as well, because there could be changes in medications that we don't know about that could be causing some of these issues, or there could be something in their blood work that might come up that doctor may notice. Hey, if there's an issue with thyroid, that could be causing some of the same signs that could be caused by depression. So we always want to have that medical doctor checking in to make sure we're ruling out anything else. And so, yes, some of the physical signs could be headaches, fatigue, low energy, stomach aches, but we always want to make sure we don't do a causation between those signs we're seeing and depression, because there could be other factors at play as well.
Okay. And how does depression, in your experience with a lot of at-risk youth and youth who have mental health issues, how does the depression, and this is not one of the questions, I just fly off and start asking questions, I know, but how does it affect schoolwork? You've been a teacher before, you've worked in classrooms. How does depression affect schoolwork in particular? Because I know that even if some parents are watching or teachers, sometimes we see a dip in schoolwork and we just think the kid's not working hard enough, or maybe there's a lack of understanding. But mental health can affect schoolwork too. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Oftentimes we get stuck as teachers and staff. We always want to see the best in our students, right? And so we may have noticed some really good production at an earlier time or earlier in the year, or maybe last year, and you see these big changes, like this is not the student I used to know. And we actually don't realize how much they might be dealing with on the inside, right? And so oftentimes when you see a broken leg, you see that person can't walk, and you're not going to make them go to PE or make her go to PE because they clearly can't walk. With depression or other mental health challenges, we often don't see these telltale signs on the outside. And so a student may be coming with so much on their mind, or they're feeling so low that even focusing and concentrating on a simple math piece or simple English work is so hard for them to do. And you just can't figure out why such a simple assignment is so hard for them, because they might be dealing with so much on the inside. They're feeling low. They may be hungry because they've lost their appetite, but they're not eating, or they're changes in sleep patterns. They haven't been sleeping well for X period of time, not getting the proper 6 to 8 hours of sleep per night, right? And so there's so many of these challenges that come up in a simple, what we may presume a simple math sheet or simple English work. Is so hard for them just to get down and focus because their concentration just isn't there.
Okay. Well, I mean, it might be hard to quantify, but in general, there are certain circumstances that trigger kids, whether it's within a peer group or within a family. And it's hard to list them all, of course, but what are some general things that trigger students, and what are your experiences? Like, how are they triggered into depression? And let me know, like, sort of, in the school, in the home, what are some general things that affect kids? And again, K to 12, so many different kids. So maybe focus on sort of like the ones who are able to express themselves a little bit more, like the intermediate kids and high school kids. What generally triggers depression in that age group?
So we always want to be careful when we create these lists, because we want to make sure we get the whole picture, right? And so oftentimes where one student is dealing with certain, let's say, family conflict at home, they may have other protective factors in their life that are keeping them going and able to still support themselves. So when I talk about this list or I talk about these pieces, I don't want to make, again, a causation, but you want to be aware of these pieces as well. So things like family dysfunction could be a potential cause. Rejection, loss of a relationship, loss of a loved one, could be involved in a traumatic event like a car accident, could be social rejection, right? That can bring on depression as well. But again, some of these factors, and there's an exhaustive list that we can create, but some of these factors not always a causation. There could be correlations between the two, right?
Okay. Like, so when you're looking at, and I know you mentioned you don't want to create lists, but any sort of change in the family, right? Like family, like even, I find that when we talk to some kids, even simply for some kids, like parents fighting at home can cause issues. Oh, here's Ian, and could cause Ian. We're all broadcasting live here for the Stigma-Free Society and the Surrey School District, just talking about depression. And asked the question about what can trigger kids. And so just sort of catching you up there. Sorry, the tech didn't work, but now you're here. So
I'm
it's awesome.
in. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
TJ just answered about, like, not creating an exhaustive list, because it's hard for us to list what can trigger kids. But I was just mentioning that, if there are kids fighting at home, or a tragedy at the home, even if it's sudden, can trigger depression in kids if things build up. And TJ was just about to comment on that, and maybe you can comment afterwards.
Yep, I will do.
We can look at family dysfunction. There could be a divorce of parents. We can look at, like I said before, trauma pieces as well. We look at social rejection. We can look at things like changes in there could be a parent having a loss of a job, which causes huge pressures and stressors at home, which could lead to more stresses for the student themselves, right? And so those are some of the examples that we can come up right now.
Yeah. Ian, and we also actually talked a little bit about, you worked with, TJ mentioned he works a lot with secondary kids, and you work primarily in the elementary area, right? So I'm going to ask you actually, I'm going to dial back and ask the first question. For those who are watching who have elementary students or elementary kids at their home, as you visit schools and you go into elementary classrooms, when you run into kids with depression, what are some telltale signs that kids are depressed or experiencing depression in an elementary classroom? TJ had mentioned about changing habits, changing clothing, changing appetite, but elementary kids, especially K to 3, which you work a lot with, they may not emanate even those things, right?
I kind of see, kids that young, is depression, it may be the wrong word, maybe a sense of sadness. And they show it within their actions, mainly in their behavior. They won't know. Sometimes they can get angry and be lashing out. A lot of withdrawal is typical. And kind of negative self-talk, talking negatively about themselves and talking themselves down. Those are kind of and pulling away from other people. Their peers and their once people they were friends with, or so you often see kind of kids that are a bit more isolated, that stick to themselves, may lash out once in a while, and then talk really badly about themselves. That's kind of what I see quite often when you talk about depression. But I think depression is kind of a tricky word to use for kids so young. Sadness and stuff. And going from what you were saying, that second question, what can be some of the triggers for it? When a family's system has been disrupted, and the normal way of life has been disrupted to a great degree, and a lot of stress is put on that family, those are definitely areas where that so-called depression could be triggered for those children. So changes of routines, changes of family environment, changes to their school, changing schools multiple times. Like some kids I know have changed schools almost once every year, and that can be very stressful. They never get a sense of a place and feel settled in. So those all things can contribute to depression for sure.
Okay, well, and we're added Michael Jacob, one of our district behavioral specialists that works primarily with me in a lot of our programs for high-risk youth. He's able to join. I apologize that the tech didn't work, Michael, but you're here now, which is great. We've been talking about just going through the first 2 questions that you have that I've laid out ahead of time. But just for yourself as a behavioral specialist, a little bit different than the counseling world, what are some behavioral triggers you see? What are some things that trigger depression, and how do kids in elementary and secondary, some of their behaviors that come out when they are experiencing mental health issues, or in particular depression? What are some behaviors that you see that you feel, I need to get that sorted for that kid?
It really runs the gamut, Daniel. It can go from externalizing kind of behaviors where they're interacting negatively with their peers, with school staff, to internalizing behaviors where they become completely withdrawn, or they interact very, very minimally with the staff. Things that trigger it can be really simple things like change in the routine, like Ian said, to problems with their peers. So it really, really looks different for every child.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as we look at our kids in our schools and a pandemic, I think things are slowly evolving, and the stress level's been constantly high for a lot of families. So that's really triggering a lot of different emotions and different feelings in kids. And so much so that we see at home, and I think you're all parents. I know all of you. You're all parents. You have wonderful kids, and Michael's are a bit older than some of ours, and mine are in the middle with Ian's, and TJ has a new child. So we all run the gamut of different levels of fatherhood. But what can parents? I think we have some parents that are watching now or will watch later. And I'm going to ask Ian to start off with this, and then we just go around. What do parents see at home when they're dealing with a child with depression? Because a lot of times, especially Michael, you have teenagers, right? Or you had teenagers. You just close your door. You don't talk to them or interact with them the same way that TJ interacts with his 2-year-old. But all kids show signs of suffering if they're suffering from depression. So what are some of those signs that you see? We'll start with Ian, then we'll go to Michael and TJ.
Yeah, I mean, I can't stress enough about having a predictable home environment, and one that especially with the kids under the age of 12 that I namely work in elementary, is that, they need a lot of love and support and predictable environments, keeping the routines as predictable as normal as possible. That all really helps to give a sense of security for a child, and that can really help. And to know that there's always a loving parent there that they can talk to. The other thing is to bring in some sense of joy and happiness into their lives. Like, to bring in, try to do something every week that brings everyone in the family some joy together of being together. That can really, really help as well. But definitely predictable routines and trying to keep a very safe environment. There's a schedule every day, and the kids know the schedule and know it in advance, where they're not seeing things coming out of left field that are unpredictable. Kids don't do well with unpredictable. They do if you can tell them and say, on Tuesday we're having a change and we're doing that, then they can prepare for that. But to live in a world that's always unpredictable, when something's happened that's brought in some depression, that can be really, really tough. So getting back to a family routine is really key.
Those are great suggestions. And Michael, maybe you can add, what are some, like, if your child is depressed as a parent in the busyness of your day, how will you even notice it? Like, even if you have a predictable schedule and everything like that Ian spoke about, how would you even see that your kid's depressed?
Well, you'll see changes in appetite, either being hungrier or not being hungry, attitude, maybe being more negative towards things, agitated, lack of desire to engage in activities that they used to enjoy, or withdrawing from their friends or family members. A lot of times kids will manifest with less energy, or being slower in their movement and speech. Things to look for too are like changes in their sleep, having less sleep, or having sleeping a lot more, difficulty with focusing, concentrating. For the younger ones, they often complain about aches and pains, tummy aches. Physical manifestations are quite common in the younger ones. Okay. So those are some of the things that you want to look for. And, it can be hard to identify, but it isn't impossible, right? It just requires a little bit of attention to what your child is doing, what your child is saying.
Well, how do we, and TJ, I know you don't have teenagers, but you work a lot with them, and Ian, you're about to have them, and Michael, you have teenagers. How do you differentiate between that and just like, it's my teenager being a teenager? Because you always talk about, teenagers, their attitude does change. They start branching out to their friends, and they bring some of their friends' attitudes home. How do we tell the difference between a change in appetite, sleep patterns, blah, 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 and that equals depression versus, this is just my regular teenager acting up, or he didn't sleep, or he or she didn't sleep last night because they were online till 2 a.m. How do parents differentiate? I think that's the hardest question for parents, is how do we know? Well,
teenagers like to sleep in. That's what teenagers like to do. But if you notice that they're not sleeping, or they're staying up late, or there's changes in their patterns, you just have to be aware of the changes. Or they're feeling tired, or they're telling you they're feeling mentally or physically tired. Or they're experiencing, or they're expressing suicidal thoughts, or they're saying things that are sort of out of the ordinary for them. But you're just paying attention to their patterns, just like you would with younger kids. Sometimes with the older ones, parents notice that they're more snappy around them, they're irritable, they're a bit more angry, they're expressing more feelings of hopelessness or more feelings of helplessness than they commonly do. Things like that.
I
Okay.
think adding to what Michael's saying is look at the holistic picture of what's happened with that child. I think kind of wrapping up what Ian and Michael are both saying, four areas I always like to look at is how are they eating, how are they sleeping, how are they exercising, and what's their connection to himself and others, right? And so what's their support system look like? It doesn't always have to be the parents, but who are they connected to? Are they connected to a teacher? Are they connected to a coach? Are they connected to an aunt or uncle as well outside the family? Right? It doesn't always have to be a direct parent, right? But are they connected?
Yeah.
Right? And look at all those four pieces together.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that, especially just wrapping up what Ian was saying as well, is if you have predictable things happening in the house, then it's much easier to see when things in your kids change, right? Your kid might always be online till 4 a.m. Then sleeping till 10 is normal. But if you recognize that, like that, along with eating patterns, along with attitude towards you, along with just a common general withdrawal from society, then that's maybe a cause for concern. And if parents are concerned, or if teachers are concerned, let's deal with teachers first, because there are probably more teachers going to be watching this than parents, but maybe all the teachers are parents as well. If teachers are concerned or parents are concerned, what should they do? Let's go with teachers first. I'll go back to Ian. If teachers are concerned about the mental health of their kids in their classroom, what are some steps they can take to reach out? They shouldn't be able to have to solve everything for themselves, right? Yeah.
No, it's not. I mean, that's why we have school counselors to also bring it up, with the school staff that are there to be supportive, and to also look at whether this is true. Like, in elementary school, you have the child all day long, but in high school, they go into different classes, and it can be much harder, I think, for teachers to really notice that this is class specific or it's more than that. Yeah. But in elementary school, if you notice a really big change in a child, or you're worried about them in this way, to definitely engage with the parents and bring them in and say, hey, we've noticed a change in the behavior of the child at school. We're seeing more withdrawn or more angry outbursts. We're just seeing a big change, and we're just curious to wonder why. And it's not for the better. It's great that we see a student sometimes really perk up and do well, and that's great. But if we're seeing a drop off in functioning, then we need to talk to the parents about it, and they need to be alerted to it, especially with kids under the age of 12. It's really important that the parents do know, so they can actually start to understand what's happening for that child at school, because they may not be seeing that same thing at home either. Yeah. So that would be a really good start. And then also talking to the parents about maybe seeing the school counselor and what you can do from there. But it's a sliding scale about interventions, and if you're just starting to be worried about a student and talking to the parents, and all the way to we're seeing really big drop off in functioning, we're seeing really big outbursts in behavior, we're seeing a really drastic change for the worse in functioning and across the board. The parents coming in and talking to your district counselors, talking to getting the district counselors involved with the behavioral specialists. And then you may even be looking for outside supports at some point, child youth mental health and other supports in the community that kind of go beyond the school system. So those are the things that it's a sliding scale. But I think the first stop is always to talk to the parents and to inform them of what you're seeing at school.
Okay, and Michael and TJ, and I'll go with Michael. I'm sort of going around this little square circle that I have here. Michael, for parents at home, you deal with a lot of parents at home as well. And, if they're saying, like, some parents just feel like they don't know what they can do, right? And what are some strategies that parents can have to be able to help the young people that are living in their house? This teacher might bring it up, but the parent be like, yeah, what do you want me to do about that? Right? They count on the school sometimes.
Yeah, sure. The number one, 2, 3, they all go together, maintaining a regular sleep schedule, maintaining a regular activity schedule, going out and doing more things with them, encouraging them to go out and do things with other people, like their peers, engaging in their favorite activities with them, helping them with things that they notice their children are finding stressful, like helping with homework or things that the students are having them, teaching them mindfulness and relaxation, going on Google together, researching those kinds of things. Sometimes adjusting their diets is an important factor as well for a lot of kids. Paying attention and not being afraid to seek out help for their child, I think, is the main one. Engaging with the school, engaging with the teacher, the counselor, and recommendations for mental health support are really, really important.
Yeah, so a high level of connection with the school. Like if parents, the more they're involved, the more they can help their child. TJ, what are some other community resources that parents can reach out to for mental health supports for their child if they need it?
Perfect. So if some of the stuff that Michael and Ian is not working, and it's easy to get frustrated or feel a little bit helpless, it's definitely important to reach out to the supports. Like I think first and foremost, we should always check in with our family doctor or doctor that we see as a walk-in clinic, right? Just to make sure we rule out anything medical that may be occurring, right? And so we always want to take that step as well. Other supports such as community counseling supports such as CYMH or Child Youth Mental Health, as Ian was saying earlier, is a really strong support system in our community as well. If you're feeling like your child or adolescent is really, like the last 2 weeks have really fallen off and the mental health crisis is really there. One of the things that we reach out to as a system is our START team from Fraser Health, and getting them to our short-term risk assessment team from Fraser Health and getting them to do their assessments. And because there's been such a decline in the last 2 to 4 weeks that we need to get immediate support and to make sure we're doing the right things for our students. So that's another avenue we can always look at as well. And there's other counseling programs out there as well, through Options or PCRS and other community agencies as well that we can seek support through.
I think as parents, we can't be afraid. I think one thing that keeps parents from going out to seek support, and you three gentlemen obviously see it as well, is the fear, right? The fear of being judged, the fear of someone saying you're not a good parent. But I think it's so important, as you three are saying, to go out and get help for the child. That's especially important. Here's the final. We're already at 26 minutes, but here's the final question. And depression definitely is something linked to many areas of mental health and wellness. It's maybe the one that we see the most because, as Ian said earlier, it's linked to just general sadness. Sadness can become depression. It's tied to an everyday emotion, which is why we talk about it so much. But I do think that it can affect other areas of mental health as well, and other areas of mental health like OCD or social anxiety can also lead to depression. So the final question, and let's start with Ian this time, and then go TJ, Michael, to sort of wrap up. How is depression or other areas of mental health, how are they linked to depression, and what can we do as a school system and as a family to help our kids through the general keeping their mental health healthy? That's really the question. Is how can we help our kids keep their mental health healthy? Ian, TJ, Michael, to wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing here is that what we say is like getting good sleep, getting lots of exercise, being connected with your kids, and making sure that they have outside connections as well. That connection piece and the attachment piece is really important for younger kids. So are they doing fun things with their parents? Are you have a schedule that's predictable? Are they getting the right amount of sleep and eating nutritious food? And is there some form of joy and happiness that is being in their lives, a weekly basis that they're doing with their parent or with them and out with peers, and they're connected to their community and their friends? I think, those are the things that we can do as a base underlier to keep us healthy. And sometimes that's, we will still come into some mental health issues, even if we do all those things right. But at least it gives you a good starting spot to launch off from. And then, if all those things are happening and you're that connected to your kids and you are involved in life like that, it is easier to see changes because you have those predictable routines and those things going. And sleep is an incredibly important thing. I mean, I've seen elementary school children that are going to bed at like 2, 3 in the morning, and waking up for school and falling asleep at school. And you know what? That brings on a lot of depression about not being lively at school, not being able to feel like yourself, to connect with other children, not to be able to do your best schoolwork, and really be dragged down for a child. So I can't stress enough the importance of really good sleep routines and eating routines, really.
Awesome. TJ.
So some of the protective factors, like Ian was saying, are those pieces. And so we can also look at making sure the child or adolescent feels balanced. Sometimes a really busy, stressful schedule for the whole week can also cause and cause us to have mental health issues. Not so much a disorder, but feeling stressed out and overwhelmed because we're so busy. So making sure we take care of ourselves, make sure we're balanced, make sure we have some self-care put into our child or adolescent's life as well. So what does self-care look like, and actually being intentional about it, right? So that's a really important factor as well. I think that connection, a consistent check-in, a consistent piece of someone checking in with them and making sure the child knows that they have someone to check in with as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Michael, the last word to you, sir.
Well, exactly what TJ and Ian said, and every child is different, and some children, they I don't want to say outgrow, but they definitely move on from their depression. Others may need to manage it, for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
But parents can help their children now by making sure they get the proper diagnosis and treatment. And they understanding that the depression can be from all kinds of different situations, or it could have a biological, cause. As a parent, I know I couldn't control all the stressors in my child's life. But doing those things, exercise, sleep hygiene, well-balanced meals, and a safe, supportive environment go a long way.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we mentioned those things because, I think as parents, we often forget. We try and give our kids so much activity and fill up their time so they have experiences that we forget sometimes they need to just hang out with their parents. One of the best things we did the last 3 days as a family is my wife and I took our kids to a sort of a mini Halloween celebration at the Rocky Mountain Flatbread. They just made pizza and ate it. But that was a time that we got to spend together as a family. And no matter what people's families look like, I think it's so important that they remember that kids spending time with a parent is one of the linchpins, as you guys were all saying, of keeping the family healthy. Whatever your family is, whether it's different, like your parents live in different houses or what have you. However your family looks, connecting with the parents and the guardians of the family is very important. I do want to thank you all for your time. I told you half an hour goes by quite quickly, but do any of you, because we started a bit late, we'll end a bit later, and if you have any final words to say about mental health, kids, and keeping our kids healthy, any final words?
Make sure they're connected and be connected with them.
Yeah, and going on from your point, Daniel, my kids' favorite time is movie night at home, where we make popcorn, we sit on the couch and watch a film that they like to watch. And it's their favorite time of the week. So, it doesn't have to be that complicated things to do with your kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. Connection and attachment are key. Being attached and being connected.
And I will leave it at that. Thank you all for watching the Stigma-Free Society's Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and the Surrey School District's YouTube Live broadcast. We have Michael Jacob, Tajinder, Rai, and Ian Rieveley. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate having you folks on my staff. You guys are awesome. And thank you all for watching. Thank you all for having lunch with us. The three of you, please stay on so I can say goodbye. But the rest of you, thank you. We'll see you again in a month. I'm off all of November. I'll see you again in, I think, the first or second week of December for another Stigma-Free broadcast. Have a great day.